this particular pick out of my top 50 is actually one of the cars that I was referring to in the previous episode, featuring the Zonda F. Because this is a car which, as weird as it may sound, I would choose over a Zonda F if I actually had the opportunity to own one. And that is a very strange thing to say, probably, or it would seem to be, given the way that I talk about a Zonda F, because comparatively speaking, even by my own standards, this is not as good a car. It's not that it's a bad car or a worse car in any way. It's just not even the same kind of supercar. And ironically, given the way I talked about the McLaren F1 in the Pagani episode, this more so falls into the McLaren side of things. So that's the strange thing for me. The McLaren I don't love, and I never have loved, in a similar way to the R35 GTR. I don't love the car, I just have a lot of respect for it, but it will never feature in my favourites. This one, despite being very similar to those in terms of its purpose, the McLaren in particular, because this is designed to win races, for me this one does cross over the divide to be not only a favourite car of mine, but a dream car as well, because the Mosler MT900 is most definitely one of my dream cars. It's the kind of supercar that if I actually had the cash, would be a strong candidate for actually buying one. And the reasons why, I guess, are kind of vague and difficult to explain, and that's the problem with a personal top 10 or top 20 or top 50. The higher you get, the more and more it becomes about just pure personal preference, whereas with lower cars on the list, you can almost justify them more, like with the Chaparral or the Howmet or the Panos or the Cadillac LMP, because they've achieved things. They're good in certain ways that makes them understandable. With others, though, it's just purely down to preference. The Lincoln Continentals, the Cadillac 16s, or this one. The Mosler MT900 is just one of those cars which I love. I just love it. Now, as it happens, it's an incredible supercar. Now, Mosler comes from this very interesting era in the 90s where a lot of 90s supercars tend to get overlooked. Stuff like the earlier Noble models, the Ascari Ecosse, this one, the Mosler, even before the MT900, the Mosler Raptor, the Mosler Consulia. Those cars are easily overlooked. And yet, I mean, even up to and including most famously the McLaren F1 or even the Door 962 road car, which is insanely good, almost too good for a road car, you could say, we had some truly incredible supercars come from the 90s, and yet, myself included, we tend to think about the early 2000s as being the magic era of supercars, from the Gumperts to the Ascaris to the SLRs to the Carrera GTs, the Zondas, the Koenigsegg's, the Spikers. There are some great cars there for sure, and I would probably still say that overall, in terms of the range of cars, the 2000s were the best supercar era for me. The 90s, though, is not to be overlooked. We had some incredible cars from that era. The McLaren stands alone as being incredible in everyone's eyes, even if you don't like it, myself included. Well, not that I don't like it, I just don't love it. The Mosler, though, is a similar kind of concept, but for whatever reasons, just doesn't get the same respect. Now, the Mosler is not designed to be the fastest car in the world. It was designed originally around the concept, a very similar concept to what Lee Noble had with the Ascari Ecosse, later on the Noble brand, and look how good they turned out, of making this kind of lower level race car for the road. And they did that really well, and yet they still don't get the recognition that they deserve. Now, the original Mosler, the Consulia, is not exactly a pretty car, but it did its job. Tiny engine, barely any power by today's standards, but it dominated racing, and it was banned because of it. It was later refined into the MT900, and the MT900 is the flagship of the brand. It's my favourite one. Now, my favourite version kind of flip-flops between two. I love the Mosler MT900S, which is the one that most people tend to think of as being the best Mosler, but the reality is the best one is the GTR. Still a road car. It sets itself apart with a larger rear diffuser, and also most notably a black roof, which immediately sets it apart. And the difference in performance is notable. The MT900S has around 500 horsepower. It's a Corvette-sourced engine. Again, I love the basis of using Corvette tech because it's the most popular engine in the world, and it makes a good basis to work from. It's affordable, and it works. So why go for something fancy? But what they did that was so brilliant is they kind of took the concept of a Corvette and then wrapped it up in an XJ220 or wrapped it up in an R390, because this has a very much so TWR performance kind of vibe to it. And as far as street cars go, there's not much else that can beat a Mosler in a point-to-point race. But all of that ability, in GTR form for instance, you're looking at, I believe it's a 7-litre engine instead of the roughly 6-litre that the S version has, 600 horsepower, which sounds like a fairly standard supercar amount of power, but what it can do from that can wipe the floor with most other supercars of that level. 212 miles per hour and 0 to 60 in 3.2. That's some serious territory. Plus, unlike a lot of its other rivals, you could say, of the time, the mid-2000s, this one can destroy most of them around a track, and it's a real shame, I think, that the Mosler MT900 was never taken around the Top Gear track, because this car, the GTR in particular, but even the S version, it could have come close to the Ascari A10, the Gumpert Apollo, a number of the others, and I wouldn't be surprised if it actually could have beaten them. I believe it could have potentially beaten the Gumpert and the Ascari. Maybe not, but it would have definitely been close, that's for sure. I mean, just look at how good it is as a race car. The road car has, I believe, more power. So it's an incredible performance machine, and even the pricing is surprisingly good. The Mosler MT900 is far cheaper than a Gumpert Apollo or than an Ascari A10 would have been had they actually produced it. And I love the whole package of the MT900 as well. I think it's one of my, well, it is one of my favourite supercar designs, visually speaking. It's smooth, it's simple, it looks kind of like a cross between 90s GT1 and sort of LMP to some degree as well. Looks great from any angle. And the interior, I love it. It's got a kind of an Americanized approach to the interior, a bit too much chrome for some people's taste probably, but I love it. It's this idea of a usable race car on the road, and to me it just has a bit more flair than something like the McLaren F1. Not necessarily quite as iconic, but either way, race car, road car, whatever the case may be, Mosler, like Ascari, like Noble, is one of those manufacturers that doesn't shout from the rooftops, they just quietly get the job done. I love them for that, and the MT900 is definitely not just a favourite of mine, but a dream car as well. But that's it for this pick overall. Of course, you can check out all of the other episodes by clicking through at the end, and for now, as always, thanks for watching.